What's going on, everybody? I'm Johnny Brook. Welcome back to another Crafted Workshop video, and welcome to the finished kitchen here in the Not So Tiny House. So I'm super excited to finally have this kitchen done, and now that it's done, I wanted to go over the build process and kind of catch you up on the work I've done since the last video. Obviously, there's been a lot of work done, as well as go over some design considerations you might want to think about if you're building or remodeling your small kitchen. Obviously, design was hugely important to maximize the utility of this smaller kitchen, and that design process started way back when Rick Caseby, the architect who came up with the plan for the tiny house, was working on the initial design. And Rick came up with the general layout of the kitchen, which included the framing design, which allowed these upper cabinets to kind of be tucked in flush with this upper wall section, which I think is a really nice detail. Once the basic design was figured out, next I needed to figure out the specifics of the appliances in the space so I could make sure the correct electrical and plumbing service was installed during those rough-ins. So after doing some research on smaller appliance options, I stumbled across Samsung's Small Spaces collection, which seemed perfect for my needs. The combination of the fridge, range, and dishwasher take up a ton of space in a standard kitchen, at least here in the US. I'm sure you Europeans will comment on this as you have on my previous kitchen videos. And here's a comparison of the sizes of standard appliances versus the Small Space collection appliances I went with. And as you can see, using these appliances freed up a ton of room, which translated to a lot more cabinet space. In addition to the appliances, I also needed to decide on the sink size, and I ended up going with a 28-inch sink, which left me enough room for a more functional corner cabinet, which I'll show you in a bit. So with those details worked out, I got the finalized kitchen layout transferred onto the floor with some painter's tape, which I think is a great way to visualize how a space is gonna look and feel. You can actually kind of walk around in it. And this was also helpful for my electrician and plumber when they went to rough in everything. Once the rough-ins were done and the drywall and plywood were installed, I could finally get to work building and installing all the cabinets. And I've got separate videos on those parts of the kitchen project in case you want some more detail there. I spent a ton of time working out the specific cabinet sizes to house some of the features I wanted, including the built-in trash and recycling drawer, which is a favorite feature in our main kitchen, which I remodeled a few years ago. My cabinet layout was a little unique due to the fancy touch-to-open hardware I used, but otherwise they were pretty straightforward to build and install. One tip I would mention though when planning your kitchen is to leave a little more wiggle room than you might think you need, as it's definitely tempting to try and keep your tolerances to the bare minimum to maximize your cabinet space, especially in a smaller kitchen. And this came back to bite me in a few places. First, when installing the upper cabinets. As you might remember, I ran into issues with the drywall mud buildup, pushing the cabinets down lower on the wall, which then caused interference with the fridge. I also ran into issues with the tight fridge fit when the countertops were installed, as the installers couldn't get the quartz countertops into place without removing a strip of drywall, which was kind of a mess. So my recommendation would be to add more clearance, especially around your fridge, and also to utilize filler strips more to give yourself a little bit more wiggle room when getting everything into place. And as it turns out, there's a very good reason professional cabinet installers use these methods. Once the cabinets were in, I got the island installed in the kitchen, and this island was important for a few reasons. First, it's the main dining surface in the tiny house, with this overhang on the backside of the island functioning as kind of a small table. Second, the island houses one of my favorite amenities in the tiny house, the commercial under-counter ice maker. Again, entertaining is a big part of my life, and I knew having plenty of good quality ice for cocktails and the like would be really handy out here in the tiny house. Once the island was installed, I could get started on another really big design element of this small kitchen, the tile backsplash. So if you followed along with the tiny house build, you'll know that I went with plywood walls and ceilings throughout a lot of the tiny house. And love them or hate them, I personally think they turned out great, but I also knew I wanted to break up that natural wood wherever possible in these spaces to keep it from being overwhelming. For that reason, I decided to go with a bright white trapezoid tile for the kitchen backsplash, and I decided to install it all the way up to the ceiling trim on this wall with the sink to really make it pop visually. So my parents had stayed in the tiny house the week before I tackled the backsplash install, so the first step was to clean off the counters and get them covered up with trash bags to keep them from getting covered in thin set and grout. I also went ahead and removed the faucet temporarily, as it's a lot easier to tile without the faucet. Next, I could get a schluter strip installed where the drywall and plywood met up, and this is where the backsplash would end. I fastened the schluter strip in place using roofing nails, and roofing nails are great for this application as they have an extremely flat head, so they wouldn't cause the tiles to kind of be pushed out in those spots. I repeated the process of adding more schluter strips around the window jambs, and these strips will cover both the drywall and tile edges, and once painted white, should blend in nicely with the window jambs. With those pieces installed, I could figure out how I wanted to start the tile at the rightmost schluter strip, and thankfully cutting the tiles roughly in half widthwise worked out pretty well, and this also cut down on the number of wasted tiles. To cut the tiles, I pulled out the real MVP on this tile project, my Craftsman V20 tile saw. And if you guys have watched my channel, you know I've used this saw a bunch in the past. In fact, I've used it on every single tile project I've ever done, and I love how easy it is to set up and use. I have larger tile saws, but for a little backsplash project like this, it seemed like a little bit too much work to get it set up. Basically, to set up the saw, you just need to fill the reservoir with water, which keeps the blade wet, add a V20 battery, and I only went through about 3 of those during this whole project, and you're off to the races. Cutting with the saw goes quick, and as you can see, the cut quality is great. I much prefer a tile saw to a snap cutter, especially on ceramic tiles like this. You tend to end up with a much more jagged edge with a snap cutter. Anyway, once I had a handful of tiles pre-cut, I could get to installing them by first spreading a layer of thin set on the wall using a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch square notch trowel. Next, I added the first tile, working it into the thin set to make sure it adhered well to the wall, and also adding an 1/8 inch spacer below the tile to space it up off the countertop. And I just continued repeating that process down the first row, and once I had a few more tiles installed, I could start on the second row. To help with alignment, I had a line laser set up so the vertical line was just touching the corner of the first tile, and this laser reference line helped me keep things aligned as I moved up the wall. Also, I did check the flatness of the countertop, again with the laser, but since I installed the cabinets with that same laser, the countertops were pretty much dead flat, so I didn't have to account for any out of levelness there. After installing a few more tiles on the first 2 rows, I started in on the 3rd row, which needed a small piece of tile to fill in between the schluter strip and the outlet. Once that was in, I marked where I needed to cut the next tile in the row and headed out to the tile saw to make the cut. This tile needed to be notched around the window, and I was able to make this notch cut with the tile saw, which you definitely couldn't do with a snap cutter, by first cross-cutting and then ripping the rest of the notch. I also used an offcut against the fence to keep the tile square to the blade, and this was definitely one of the bigger challenges of working with this trapezoid tile. Anyway, after confirming the fit, I got the tile installed on the wall before starting on the 4th row. And this was really just more of the same, installing the first half tile and then marking where I needed to cut the second tile to fit around the window. After starting the 4th piece, I filled in the tiny corner piece around the outlet, and then I could continue on down the wall. And I had a few rip cuts to contend with here under the window, which were a little bit tricky, and so they definitely slowed things down a bit, but I got them installed and then unfortunately had to call it there for day 1. I started day 2 by removing the tile spacers, which are a heck of a lot easier to remove before the thin set is fully cured, and then I really got into a groove installing tile. While I do that, I want to take a second to thank Craftsman again for sponsoring this video. As you've probably seen, I've been using these Craftsman V20 power tools for a few years now, and overall, they've been great. Craftsman offers a full line of cordless power tools in their V20 line, which also includes cordless lawn and garden tools, which I use all the time. And if you're looking to upgrade your cordless power tools, make sure to check out the links to all of the Craftsman V20 tools I used in this video, all of which are available on Amazon in the video description below. Thanks again to Craftsman for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to work. So this work was all basically more of the same until I got to the light fixture on the wall, which I had to scribe around because it's a circle. Thankfully, this cut went really easy with the tile saw, and I could even back bevel the cut using the saw, which made fitting the tile to the light fixture super simple. I continued installing more tile and got the entire big wall wrapped up before lunchtime, which I thought was pretty awesome progress. I continued working on this shorter wall section after lunch and got the last tile installed by about 4 p.m., ending this run with another section of that same schluter strip. And I was loving the way this tile was looking, and now I just needed to wait for the thin set to cure more before adding the grout. So I got prepped for grouting the following day by removing the spacers and cleaning up any excess thin set from between the tiles. I used a bagged grout here, which I much prefer to the pre-mixed grout I've used in the past, and I got it mixed up with my Craftsman V20 drill. Next, I got the grout applied to the wall, working it into the joints from multiple directions to make sure the joint was completely filled before scraping off the excess. By the time I finished applying the grout, the section where I started was set up enough to start wiping off any excess. And the grout had actually dried a little bit more than I wanted, so I had to work the joints a decent amount with the sponge to get them looking good, but luckily this grout is pretty forgiving. I I also made sure to change the water in my grout bucket frequently, as this really helps to reduce any grout haze from forming later, and this is a mistake I've made a bunch in the past. I finished the grouting work completely soaked in sweat, and I always forget how physical this process is, but I think it turned out looking really good. The next day I could get any haze or bits of grout cleaned up with this scrubber, and I also went ahead and removed the trash bags at this point. Once the walls and counters were cleaned up, I got the seam between the tile and the countertops caulked. And if you try to apply grout to this seam, the grout will crack over time due to seasonal movement. I first wiped down the area with some denatured alcohol and then ran a heat gun across the joint just to make sure any water from when I had cleaned off the wall previously was nice and dry before applying the caulk. I used a color matched 100% silicone caulk, applying it and then tooling the joint with a caulk tool. And I sprayed the caulk down with more denatured alcohol before tooling the joint, and this helps keep the caulk from sticking to the caulk tool. I repeated the process on both walls and in the corner, which you also want to caulk instead of grouting. And with that done, I could call the tile work done, thankfully. From there, I had a few odds and ends left to get the kitchen fully wrapped up, starting with installing the rest of the appliances. So I'd actually installed the cooktop a few weeks back, but was waiting on the replacement for that damaged wall oven, which finally arrived after months of being back ordered. Thankfully, the wall oven fit like a glove, and I got it fastened to the cabinet with the included screws. And this cooktop and wall oven combo is a great alternative to a full-size range. And as I showed earlier, this saved me a ton of space in the kitchen, both width-wise, but also it doesn't stick out into the kitchen like a typical range. Now that the tile was in, I could get the filler strip installed on the rightmost upper cabinet, and this required some pretty detailed fitting. So the gap between the cabinet and the wall was about 1/8 of an inch wider at the top of the cabinet, so I had to carefully lay out where to cut, and I cut this piece off camera with my table saw, because my table saw is all the way up in my garage and I didn't feel like moving my camera. I also beveled the cut edge, which made adjusting the fit with a hand plane much easier. Once the fit was looking good, I needed to trim back the LED strip trim before installing the filler strip, and I had purposely left this piece long, and after marking where I needed to cut, I pulled out my B20 oscillating multi-tool to make the cut. And these tools are really worth their weight in gold on these kind of projects, as I really don't know how I would have made this cut otherwise. Once that was done, I could get the filler strip installed, first tacking it in place with my brad nailer. To attach the strip more securely, I pre-drilled and countersunk a few holes and added screws to permanently attach the filler strip. And as you can see, the filler strip really gives the cabinets a nice finished look and also hides that end of the tile run. Another thing on the kitchen to-do list was the toe kick strips, which I hadn't installed after getting the flooring finished up. And these needed to be ripped to width, which again, I did at the table saw off camera. And then I could attach the mounting clips, which attached the toe kick to the leveling feet. And I love this system of toe kick installation, as there is a ton of wiggle room with the side-to-side play in the clips. Once the clips were installed, the toe kick just clipped into place, and then I could repeat the process on the other cabinet along with the cabinet here in the island. The last thing left to do here in the kitchen was install the blind corner insert, which is made by Rev-A-Shelf, and I got it through Rockler. This thing takes an otherwise fairly useless space and adds a ton of storage, and I really like this tray system versus your typical Lazy Susan. With that done, I got the faucet and sink light reinstalled and also installed the island chandelier. And with that done, I could officially call this kitchen project a wrap, finally. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. As I've been saying for the last couple of weeks, we are in the home stretch here on the tiny house. Got a few other odds and ends left, the biggest of which is getting the interior and exterior of the tiny house painted. Once that's done, I'm gonna be recording a tour out here, as well as putting out a shorter time-lapse video, probably 20 to 30 minutes long, as well as a really long kind of supercut of this entire project start to finish. My buddy Eric from the Perkins Builder Brothers did something similar, and I thought that was really cool. It's basically a documentary on building a house start to finish. So if you guys don't want to miss both of those videos, go ahead and get subscribed and ring the notification bell. Also, as always, I'll have links to all the tools and materials, including those Craftsman B20 tools I use, down in the video description below. And last, if you guys want to support me, I sell plans for a lot of my woodworking projects, as well as the tiny house. I also sell merch, and I have both Patreon and YouTube memberships set up, so go check out one of those. All right, thanks for watching, y'all, and until next week, happy building.